Greetings and welcome to the channel. My name is Dr. Gyesie, transformational coach and shamanic leadership guide here at Inner Mileage, where we help folks transform and understand the trauma-based perspectives of the limiting self-beliefs and how to overcome them and live resonant lives right here, right now. Today we're going to talk about the ascension of an empath and why it's important to release old habits in the path to becoming your higher self. Empath ascension, why releasing old habits is the key to becoming your higher self. So, fellow travelers, today's teaching or transmission is not about basic behavioral change, although it is. It's about the quantum architecture of identity transformation itself. And we're not discussing habits as mere routines, although we are. What we are actually doing is unpacking them as a neurobiological engraving, karmic residues, and ancestral chains that keep you tethered to the past. And if you identify as an empath, your sensitivity does not merely amplify your experience, it gives you access to the deeper undercurrents that others deny or bypass. So the question we hold today is, why must empaths dismantle these old habits to truly ascend to their higher self? And what does this process entail across biological, ancestral, and quantum dimensions? Let's begin. So I want to talk a little bit about the anatomy of old habits. See, habits are superficial tendencies, but they are not, really. They are consolidated neural networks primarily housed in the basal ganglia of the brain, an area that evolutionarily was designed to conserve energy by automating repetitive behaviors. Do you see the ganglia, the basal ganglia? In other words, when trauma intersects with early attachment, this is based on research, habits like guilt and shame become survival mechanisms. And for an empath, this automation is hypercharged, it really is, by a finely attuned mirror neuron system, right? It really is. And this explains why empaths unconsciously absorb other people's emotional patterns into their behavioral scripts. When we go into the Buddhist psychological framework, these mental states of suffering are known as sankharas, or conditioned mental factors that form karma-producing intentions. In other words, these habits operate as latent tendencies, often invisible until conditions ripen. When we go into the Hermetic view, habits are seen as archetypal distortions, meaning when an empath carries guilt and shame, they are distortions of the archetype of humility and self-reflection, which devolves into self-flagellation. Now we go into the epigenetics of this, borrowing from the work of Bruce Lipton specifically. What Bruce Lipton demonstrated was that belief patterns can alter gene expression through pathways like the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, meaning habits rooted in negative affect literally change your biochemical makeup. And all habits for empaths are biopsychal residues of unresolved energetic entanglements. And once you understand this, you're winning the battle of overcoming your own conditioning, you see, and the conditioning away from habits that keep you trapped versus habits that uplift you. So why are empaths particularly vulnerable to old habits that would delay ascension? Well, when we go into the polyvagal realm, see, the empath's nervous system maintains a chronic state of neuroception, meaning it constantly evaluates relational and environmental cues for threats or safety, even below conscious awareness. And this makes the empath's path uniquely susceptible to adopting guilt and shame as strategies to maintain perceived relational safety, particularly in toxic familial or professional systems. I've lived this, I've been there for years and years and years, right? When we go even deeper into the doggone cosmology, for example, so in doggone thoughts, the empath holds a disproportionate quality of Nyama, life force, and thus becomes a magnet for unresolved energies from ancestral and collective fields. When we go into Advaita Vedanta, the empath's vulnerability is due to a false identification with the ego self and its adjuncts, upadi, rather than the true self, the Atman. Old habits are karmic skins that the empath mistakes for the essence. And when you look at this even more intellectually, empaths inherit not just biological DNA, but psychological and energetic DNA, which is shame, guilt, and self-abandonment as transgenerational scripts. This is why they experience these patterns with greater depth and persistence. Though we come into kind of the religious, mystical, and esoteric dimension. So from a Christian mystical standpoint, you borrow from the work of Meister Eckhart, for example. And Meister Eckhart famously said that the soul that is attached to anything, even to its own suffering, cannot be free. Meister Eckhart. The soul that is attached to anything, even to its own suffering, cannot be free. Then we realize that this is speaking to the state of attachment. Same thing supported in Sufism by Al-Ghazali, who said, habits of negativity are viewed as nafs amara, the command itself, which must be tamed to reach nafs mutamina, the tranquil self. And this is related to the Hermetic principle of us above, so below, us within, so without, because the empath's external reality mirrors the habitual state of their inner field. In the Buddha Dhamma also, it says, whatever a being frequently thinks upon will become the inclination of their mind, Majjhima Nikaya 19. This evidence how repeated thought habit loops concretize karmic tendencies. Do you see? So you realize that old habits anchor the empath to lower density vibrational planes, sometimes conceptualized as the hell realms, precisely because of vibrational correspondence. And then when we shift into the shamanic diagnosis of habitual negativity, we realize that guilt and shame are not abstract. They manifest as specific energetic forms. For example, cords, which are threads that link the empath's energy to abuses or ancestral wounds. Knots, which are congealed energy blocking the flow of life force through chakras. And then chains, which are binding mechanisms reinforcing karmic cycles. And when you understand this, then you realize that you can break the cords by cutting cords, you can release the knots by disentangling yourself energetically, and you can cut chains by being aware of your mental and emotional loops and interrupting those loops, creating neuroplasticity. Who knew that neuroplasticity is firmly in the realm of magic? So you realize that these energetic structures often predate the empath's own life and are inherited through collective ancestral trauma. And if anything I'm saying here resonates with you, type transform in the comments section or book a free session on my website, immanmileage.com. Or let us know what your relationship to what I'm sharing here has been. So ultimately, you realize that the empath's task is not to perform a soul retrieval only, or psychological tasks only, but by journeying to the origin of these energetic constructs, the empath severs them at the roots. So now we talk about ascension. It's important to realize that as you begin to become aware of the distortions in your worldview, you begin to shift. Epigenetically, your emotional shifts alter your cellular microenvironment, impacting the expression of stress-related genes. So empathic ascension is bioenergetic recalibration at every layer, molecular, neural, spiritual, karmic, and ancestral. And the process of release, we can go into this based on your specific scenario when you reach out. But know that if any of this resonated with you, type transform in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And remember, there's absolutely no one like you. To release old habits is to liberate your nervous system. Keep ascending, keep shining your light. Peace.